Oh, good afternoon, my relatives. This is Tony Gonzales, your host, Eagle and Condor. And today, February 16th, and this will be broadcast again on February 23rd. We have a guest in the studio, and that is Mr. Sheridan Noelani Enomoto
Aloha.
of Hope and of Green Action, and we'll be talking more with her. But my relatives, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the program that we have for you. One of which, first foremost, I wanted to let you know that February the 27th marks the anniversary of Wounded Knee 1973. Many of you who are watching were probably well aware that what was happening in South Dakota at that time in February and on to for 71 days the siege at Wounded Knee in the small village there on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And lots happened since the occupation there, including more notably uh, the death and the killings, the murders, if you will, of over 60 men and women from the period after Wounded Knee from 73 to 1976, referred to as the Reign of Terror. And these deaths were never investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So on February the 27th here in San Francisco, we will be commemorating and acknowledging the anniversary at Wounded Knee. And we'll have several veterans with us who were there on the 27th here in San Francisco. Lenny Foster, Dene Navajo man, and he's also the spiritual advisor for Leonard Peltier, who's now been in prison, as some of you know, for over 44 years. And we'll also have Miss Jessie Riddle, another of the veteran of Wounded Knee in 73. And we'll be gathering, and we invite you, the public, in particular the interfaith community, to join us for a noon vigil prayer circle at the Department of Justice in San Francisco at 450 Golden Gate Street. And that would be from 12, let's say, till about 1:30. And we hope you will join us. And in particular, we will be giving notice to the Department of Justice that there is a need to investigate the death of these men and women during that period, the Reign of Terror from 73 to 76, who were never investigated. So we're going to read off the names and the women, and we're going to have a drum, and we're going to have some sage, and honor them and the sacrifices. So tune in for that afternoon prayer vigil. Mark your calendar. Also that night of the 27th in San Francisco, we will be having a gathering of friends and allies to honor the men and women of Wounded Knee, 1973, and that will be held at the office of the Answer Coalition in San Francisco in the Mission District, 2969 Mission Street, right near the corner of 26th. Okay, and that will be starting at 6 o'clock with a Mexica Teocalli traditional danzantes who will do an honor dance for the men and women of Wounded Knee 73. And we hope to get started with the program at about 6:30. And we'll have some refreshments. We'll have some vendors there so you can do your shopping early. Don't wait for Christmas, November, December. Come and do some shopping. We'll have a little raffle there to raise a little bit of change so we can continue on informing the public of what's going on. And of course, we'll have Lenny Foster there talking to us about his experience at Wounded Knee in 73, the 71 days he was there. And Jessie Riddle, California Pomo lady, will share her experience of being at Wounded Knee. When she was a young age of 21, she heeded the call at Wounded Knee, and she went. So she'll be sharing that experience. And I also wanted to invite you in particular to a movie that we will be screening there that night. It's called From Wounded Knee to Standing Rock, A Reporter's Journey. And that reporter is Mr. Kevin McCurran, who happened to be inside Wounded Knee during a large part of that time, and able to document with photos and some writings. And now he's compiled it all together for this very informative, somewhat provocative movie, theater, feature film, if you will. And by the way, some of you here in the Bay Area might have seen the film before, From Wounded Knee to Standing Rock. It was screened in November by the American Indian Film Festival at the Brava Theater in the Mission District in San Francisco. So I encourage you to join us both that afternoon for the prayer vigil in San Francisco, 450 Golden Gate, from 12 to 1:30 in the afternoon, and later in the evening at 2969 Mission Street to honor the men and women of Wounded Knee 73, and to see the film From Wounded Knee to Standing Rock, A Reporter's Journey. It's 89 minutes long, and I must say that it does raise some questions in the involvement of the law enforcement that helped create the environment that was experienced during that period, both at Wounded Knee and the Reign of Terror from 73 to 76. Well, having said that as priority, I hope you mark that on your calendar. Just to mention a little bit about what we all saw the Sunday before with the referred to as the Super Bowl between these two football teams who, still seek to put some concussion into their heads. The Kansas City team and the San Francisco team, both with their mascot caricatures. I think it's a wake-up call to what many of us would be aware of, having seen portions of that game. Let's call it the Super Appropriation Bowl, because that's what it was. Both teams using mascots with reference to indigenous peoples. And for those in the Bay Area in particular who think about the 49ers, that has a real despicable memory in many people's minds, in particular the California Indians, who the 49er, that symbol of who is that anyway? Yosemite Sam. But he's able to continue with the racism that we see on a daily schedule, on a daily instances, and many of us who are involved in removing mascots from mascots from public schools, of which over 2,000 school districts across the United States have derogatory, negative images of Indians as mascots, and these has to be removed. Here in the Bay Area, we struggled with the change at Mount Tamalpais in the late 80s. Fast forward through other school districts, and more recently, we changed Vallejo School District. They had a 92-year-old mascot of an Apache Indian, by the way. And 3 years ago, the School Board of Trustees voted unanimously to remove that, as well as Hercules, the community of Hercules, And the high school there, they also removed a 100-year-old mascot of an Indian as well. So change comes about slowly, but the more we are aware of how offensive and insulting these images are to our peoples and our culture, this is what we call like the Super Bowl that you just saw. That was the Super Appropriation Bowl. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. Hopefully, on our next programming, maybe sometime in March, we'll have our co-host Jolene Crawford, who isn't able to be with us these days, but with her we can talk more about the mascots and what the 49er symbol means to California Indian people, her being of Pomo descent as well. And my relatives, we have in the studio Miss Sheridan Noelani Emamoto of Green Action, and want to welcome you to the show, Sheridan. And if you can please tell us a little bit about yourself, the Green Action organization, very effective in this western region activities and in California, and a little bit about yourself. How did you come into the Green Action offices?
Sure. So, aloha, Tony. I'm very, very grateful to be a guest here on your show.
Thank you very much.
I'm very honored and humbled. So, thank you for having me. I really wanted, actually, before we kind of get into my story of what
Sure.
brought me here, and to acknowledge that we are in the village of Yalamu, having this show on Ohlone lands. So, really grateful to be here in this space, in these lands at this time, and also want to quickly give out a huge acknowledgement for all of the kia'i or protectors who are standing in Wet'suwet'en, also known in the country of Canada, as we know of, but really
in the province of British Columbia.
Yeah, in the province of British Columbia,
Okay.
and all of those who are standing across the country, both First Nations and allies. So we really want to make sure that we acknowledge that they are presently still standing, and we support their movement. And I'm very familiar with the importance of standing. So really, my coming to Green Action for Health and Environmental Justice here in San Francisco really starts in 2015. I was living in Southern California, and I was inspired to go to actions in South Pasadena, where folks were standing or kind of in the movement for a while, but were having actions for Mauna Awa Kea, protecting the mountain on the Big Island of Hawaii from the 30-meter telescope project. Hopefully, a lot of your listeners are familiar with what's happening on Mauna Kea for some time. It's been over 200 days currently, where people have been standing since July of 2019 or 2020. Sorry, 2020. Are we?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. The time. Oh no. Basically in July.
Okay.
But really, in 2015, in Pasadena, South Pasadena, that's where the 30-meter telescope board members were having their meetings. And we were having a series of actions. And I met Auntie Pua Case, some of her ohana, as well as Chief Colleen Sisk of the Winnemem Wintu. And those actions were put together by Kumuhula Mikilani Young. So at those actions, for Mauna Kea, I met some amazing, amazing people and protectors. Chief Colleen Sisk of the Winnemem Wintu also had a prayer, a vision come to her not long after those actions in 2015 that I was attending. I had found out about the Run for Salmon. And that was inspired. It's a 2-week journey that starts in the Bay Area and goes and follows the water or watershed from the Bay, the North Bay, all the way up to Boyampoyak or Mount Shasta, and follows the water in the river. And this was inspired from a prayer, a vision that Chief Colleen Sisk and the Winnemem Wintu had. And it has its own story and background, but it was so transformative. So the first year of the Run for Salmon was 4 years ago, And actually, I'm wearing the shirt that came from that action 4 years ago. It was so inspiring and transformative for me personally that it actually brought me up to the Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure why, but I just followed my heart, and it was such a powerful experience around the water in the watershed that I stayed with some mutual friends that I had met during that first year of that journey, that movement slash
Pulling
ceremony.
up stakes from
Yes.
Southern California to come up.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I was so inspired that it ended up being the right choice. Another person that I had met had heard about my experience with the Run for Salmon and talking about the water and watershed. I was also gifted an opportunity to speak with youth at the 12th Street Academy in Oakland about the Run for Salmon right after it was finished. So when this person had heard about my participation in the Run for Salmon, she's like, well, you know what? Green Action for Health and Environmental Justice is looking for a community organizer and policy advocate who can speak on water and the importance of recognizing contamination, contaminated lands in the reality of climate change. And that also means sea or water level rise issues and shoreline communities. What do we do with that reality and those relationships? And we need somebody who can talk about those realities and advocate and work with the community. And so I met with Bradley Angel of Green Action 3.5 years ago, and I was hired, and I've been a part of the Green Action team since that time. But really, it was because I was inspired to attend Mauna Kea actions. I had met Chief Colleen Sisk in Southern California, and then less than a year later, I ended up in the Bay following the Run for Salmon that was inspired by that chief and the watersheds. And really, when we talk about the Run for Salmon, it's not just really the waters of the Bay all the way up to Mount Shasta, but really it's the waters of California. And now I do have Native Hawaiian. I'm Kanaka Maoli, Japanese, Scottish, African American, and have some Kado and Punjabi roots. But I think it's important to recognize that these are the lands of my birth as well. And I was born in Southern California. And when we think about our waters in this particular part of Turtle Island, we really need to understand the relationship, and we need to return to our water and watershed relationships. And they really start from our mountains, right? And in California, it's Boyampoyak or Mount Shasta.
Sherry, I was going to ask you, if I may, being inspired, because a lot of our viewers, we hope they're inspired by many of the issues we bring to them. And I wanted to ask you, being inspired, but what knowledge you might have had about water or organizing. Did you have some background already, or Bradley and Green Action picked you up and gave you orientation, prepared you, and all these environmental topics you began to learn and understand as organizing tools? Is that?
Yeah, sure. It was definitely a combination.
Did you have college background as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So I actually, this is a great question. I started organizing when I was in college a few years ago. I'm definitely a lot older than I look, but I went to college. I attended undergrad in St. Paul, Minnesota, at a liberal arts college called McAllister. And from there, I find with organizing or being a community quote-unquote activist, myself and most of the people that I tend to meet in this work didn't set out to be an activist when they kind of found it was a necessity. And that's exactly what happened at my college campus. There were other students of color and folks organizing with different cultural groups, but we were in Minnesota, specifically in the Twin Cities, And as you know, American Indian movement had a strong presence in Minneapolis, and the urban Native population is actually very large. There are 5 reservations.
Oh, yes, the founding of the American Indian movement, July
Correct.
of 1968.
Exactly. But there was no Native or Indigenous voice on my campus, but everyone else had a voice. And I thought there was something wrong with that. There was something missing. I ended up exploring. There was a cultural house or place where students would come and organize on campus. And I started sort of roaming around and found remnants of an organization called Proud Indigenous Peoples for Education. That used to be a very strong and active Native Indigenous organization on campus, but they suddenly were not there. And I found out they were very active, and I ended up meeting the alum who started the organization through someone on campus who remembered that organization being active. That relationship or connection led me to the community, the Native community that was living in the Twin Cities, and was invited to an event, offered tobacco, met different elders and different community members, and was basically given permission from the alum who started Proud Indigenous Peoples for Education and Community to bring the organization back. Now, I wasn't sure because, I'm not native to that area. I wasn't from that tradition.
Or how long you would stay there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was really both nervous and humbled to have that permission to bring it back. But I felt it was necessary. So we started off with just the intention of bringing the drum back to campus. And we had...
this is in the Twin Cities.
This is in the Twin Cities, in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yeah,
at the
one of the largest
College.
concentration of Indian peoples.
Exactly. And I learned all of that. And it ended up being, we had an event for now what we know as Indigenous Peoples Day. And that was our welcoming back the drum and the Native community back to that particular part. And so that was a really great beginning, and we ended up working with the community and the youth and bringing a Native voice back to campus. Myself, and we were a very small group. At the time there weren't a lot of Native or Indigenous folks on campus, but I had a fellow Maori sister in the group. There were a couple of other Native folks from different parts of Turtle Island, as well as we collaborated with other Indigenous Native groups throughout the Twin Cities, with the University of Minnesota, St. Thomas, Carleton, any campus that had a Native or Indigenous group. We banded together and supported each other's events and communities. So it was a really beautiful experience and gift to be a part of, and to bring that organization back. And I was really happy to hear later that it had a life of its own. But that's really how I started getting involved specifically in organizing, but also...
Getting woke.
Yeah, getting woke, getting very aware. And I think, too, it's just always understanding that I'm always a student. I was always learning, listening, finding out more. There's this work you're constantly learning, and sometimes a lot of it's just experience. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you're like, oh, let's do something different. But that's really where it started. And also, one of the gifts of that time that I have to mention, I met with Winona LaDuke, of course Native to White Earth in that area of Anishinaabe, and she at the time was part of Indigenous Women's Network, IWN. And they had a conference they wanted to schedule for all of the Native women that were part of that network, and honoring. And we meaning the Proud Indigenous Peoples for Education at McAllister College, and all of those collaborative organizations across the Twin Cities at other college campuses, we were able to host their conference, the IWN conference, in 1998. At the time, at McAllister.
IWN, the Indigenous Women's
Network. Yeah, at the time. So I got to meet Neelak Butler, Ingrid Wishunawatuk, Marsha Gomez. There were Silvia Rodriguez. She was with the Zapatista movement at the time. I met some amazing, powerful women that I was really honored to meet. Shortly after, some of those women were no longer living. right after that. So that was definitely something that I did not see happening, but was much bigger than what I could have imagined. So we were a tiny but mighty group. And I find that's a common theme throughout a lot of movements, is that even though there may not be a lot of us, you never know what kind of impact you're going to have. So that was my real education of of learning how, to meet a need, to bring an opportunity for people to come together, for community to have a voice and to be heard, and to be known that we're still here, that we're still visible.
No, thank you, for sharing that pathway to the Bay Area and to Green Action, whom you're with today. And your story is inspiring to many of us, and I'm sure many of the viewers of the show. I mean, being inspired and then taking that first step to get involved. I'm thinking of myself as well, how I was motivated and inspired, and being taught by so many men and women, as you said, no longer with us, including, you mentioned Neelock Butler, who was a great individual, person and woman, activist, and that would inspire us to keep on moving, and many times on their behalf.
Yes.
The spirit that they left behind, stays with us. And fast forward now, Sheraton, with Green Action, how long have they been around, and any particular actions involved in now? And you have some activities that are coming up pretty soon.
Sure, yes, definitely. So I've joined Green Action 3.5 years ago.
When did they get formed? 20 years ago, you
So
said?
Green Action itself, though, right, is over 20 years old.
Oh, okay.
And that's a really great question.
And Bradley Angel, executive director the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yes.
Very good leadership, by the way.
Yes, and he actually didn't set out either
Yes.
thinking that he would have his own or be leading his own organization, and that has to do with over 20 years ago in Ward Valley, the Ward Valley action that happened, and basically the quick summary is this was a time where nuclear testing dump energy was very prevalent, and they wanted to put a nuclear dump site in sacred territory in the Mojave Desert, in a place called Ward Valley. Indigenous, very present communities that were there, very close to the Colorado River. And at that time, we think about Standing Rock and these movements now, but really there were movements like Ward Valley that were thinking about the water sources and having a nuclear dump close to a river that also was a water source for the city of Los Angeles, right? So there was, at the time, Bradley Angel was working for Greenpeace. He was part of the Indigenous Lands campaigns at the time, and there were other folks that came out to stand and protect that land and prevent them from putting a nuclear dump site into place. They stood for over 100 days. Rain, all kind of elements came their way. But during that fight, unfortunately, Greenpeace and its membership decided that they didn't want to fund or campaign Indigenous campaigns anymore.
And Neelock Butler was on that program as well, that
awesome.
you mentioned. But please
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes, it's all interwoven. And then David Harper, who was part of the Mojave tribe of Colorado River, he got together with Bradley and other folks that were there, and they decided, well, we don't really need to support the support of Greenpeace. We can form our own organization called Green Action, and hence Green Action was born literally in the stand of Ward Valley. The good news and the amazing part of it is that they did not put in the nuclear dump. It did not happen, and it was victorious, and it's a win. So they were all victorious. It was, and I want to also acknowledge the elders and the indigenous, all folks that led were in the lead of that movement at every turn, every point. When the police came, when other folks were trying to push, they were actually in the lead, and they made all the decisions, and the allies supported and followed suit. So I think there's a lot of really great education in history about how it is to stand with Indigenous peoples, to have Indigenous leadership, and also to be a good ally in those actions and support. Ward Valley is a really great example of that. And now I can say that actually next week, it'll be the 22nd gathering of this win in Ward Valley. And every year since then, they have been celebrating this victory for two reasons. Not only to celebrate the victory itself, but to remind the next generation that we always have to be vigilant. Because at any moment they could come back and say, oh, we just changed our mind. We really want to put in this site, or we want to desecrate sacred land. So I think that's another teaching, that if we do, even if we do have a victory, and in this case it was, we also need to teach the next generation of who has come before us, and to continue to protect, and what that means for our future. So yeah.
No, that's great. And that date will be next
so
week?
That is happening next week.
The date?
It is open to the public on February 22nd.
Okay.
And it's honoring that victory 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Arizona time. But the Ward Valley is in an interesting place. It's in between Needles, California, and Laughlin, Nevada, so very close to these borders. On one side, the time changes, so it's really important to recognize what time zone you're in, even though Ward Valley is in the California side, right? What are borders anyway? But on the California side, they're meeting from 9 a.m. to 11 Arizona time. So it's like an hour ahead of California time. Really important to know. So really, it would be 8 a.m.
And Sheridan, is there another, wasn't the Kettleman City another organizing endeavor there by Green Action?
So yeah, in terms of different other campaigns, my colleague Marisela and Miguel Altore, they work with Green Action, they're organizers. They live and work with Green Action in Kettleman City, which is in Central Valley. And they are also literally working with their communities around their water. A lot of people think that the aqueduct and the water that we get from Northern California all the way down to the south, that it benefits everyone from the north to the south, but that is not the case. It is 2020, and still a place like Kettleman City is still fighting to have clean drinking water, or just adequate water. They do not have that, but hopefully that is going to change in the next months. But a lot of that came from grassroots organizing and the work of organizers with Green Action and other allies and other communities that are fighting. Kettleman City is also another central part of this state, where there's just so many issues combined with having adequate water, but also just dumping sites. They're very close to Avenal, part of Kings County, and there are definitely issues, and industry is still constantly wanting to dump. So that's another kind of relation, right? We're talking about Ward Valley, but here we are in Kettleman City, where industry and folks feel like they can just dump on anywhere they want, and it tends to be in low-income, indigenous communities of color, farming communities, working class communities, our agricultural communities.
Many people now
abuse.
identify that as part of the environmental racism.
Correct.
Trying to
And it
categorize
has been.
selected areas
Yeah.
where to dump or
Correct.
provide
And,
these.
you know, we have the word environmental justice because of environmental injustice and those racisms as well. So.
And I wanted to, say the leadership of the director of Green Action, Bradley Angel, very astute strategist, and with a law background, with the JD, he's able to also provide some of the direction of how to proceed with those actions. I think, I've been associated with Bradley over the decades, and I've seen how he's developed and bringing on young people like yourself to continue that struggle. And what's happening in this other in May. Tell us
So,
about May.
yeah, so in May, actually May 16th, 2020, Saturday, it's a Saturday. We also work with the White Mesa Ute community in southern Utah. White Mesa, they have been fighting the last uranium mill literally in their territory for quite some time, and they're having a protest or protect and spiritual walk on Saturday, May 16th, 2020. Also, welcome to the public. The rally starts at 11 a.m. and it literally starts from the the res, and then we walk up to the uranium mill and have an action. So hopefully it would be great if folks had come out, and that is in White Mesa. So yeah,
All right, so we have plenty of time. We'll come back perhaps for another follow-up leading up to the May gathering there
Great.
at White Mesa. And I want to thank you, Sheridan. Any closing words? Give a website, a phone number
Sure.
for our viewers.
You can find out more about our campaigns for Green Action at www.greenaction.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us there. And again, Green Action is one word. So it would be great if you want to find out more about what's happening there. And just want to close with a Hawaiian proverb, a native Hawaiian proverb that says, "Chief, the land is chief, and human its servant." So we want to keep that in mind, that we wouldn't have health and environmental justice if we didn't have a relationship with the one that feeds us, the one who takes care of us.
And thank you very much again,
yeah.
Sheridan. And we do have a video for our viewers to talk a little bit about some of Green Action's project. Can you tell us the video that we're going to see?
Sure, the video is called Defending the Sacred. It is actually a documentary of the Ward Valley stand that I had mentioned earlier.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And my relatives, we're coming close to the hour for this show. I just want to give thanks to the Ramatash Ohlone peoples that Sheridan had referred to. And it was a great powwow last week with the Two-Spirit peoples out here at the Presidio in San Francisco. Wish them well. And don't forget February the 27th, mark your calendar now for the prayer vigil to commemorate the Warriors of Wounded Knee 1973. And that's it, my relatives. We'll see you once again on Eagle and the Condor. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
This area is a sacred area. When Matavil, God created all of us, He gave us certain areas to protect, to defend and all. One was Ward Valley.
We've lived here since time immemorial. I come from the warrior clan, so that enables me to be a keeper of the people, keeper of the water, and keeper of our children.
Ward Valley was a place where my ancestors used to live, and where my dad and his family were born and raised.
It was around 1987, I believe, that the Fort Mojave tribe and some of the other folks in the area along the Colorado River first found out that a so-called low-level radioactive waste dump was being proposed in Ward Valley.
Newsletters came across my desk and announced that there was going to be a proposed siting of a nuclear waste dump that would hold 5 football lengths full of nuclear waste.
The proposal is to bury radioactive waste, mostly from nuclear power plants, in shallow, unlined trenches. Ward Valley is on federal land administered by the Bureau of Land Management, and before they can build the dump project, This land has to be transferred to the state of California. U.S. Ecology is the company that was chosen by the state of California to operate the dump. They have operated 4 other dumps across this country, and they're all leaking radioactive waste.
Virtually all of the waste that would have been dumped at Ward Valley primarily would have come from nuclear power plants, despite the propaganda and the public relations of companies like U.S. Ecology and the state of California that were saying most of it was from medical treatment, which of course evokes great sympathy. Just one problem, it wasn't true.
The technology at Ward Valley is simple. Dig a hole in the ground, throw in radioactive waste, some of which lasts for 250,000 years, put it in a container that only lasts for 75 years, push the dirt over it, and forget about it. And what they want to do is transfer the poison from the nuclear power plants and transfer the liability at the same time to the state of California. That's the whole scheme here. If they can take this waste off their problematic real estate, if they can ship it here and pay a one-time fee at Ward Valley, they've also shifted the liability. They never have to be liable for it again. And after it's here, after 30 years, guess who owns it? Guess who's responsible if there's any leakages or accidents?
We the people.
I don't know for what reason they want to put up a thing that contaminate the groundwater and contaminate the plants and also they contaminate all the surrounding areas. Like the wind today, we have this dust. If it ever gets contaminated on the surface, well, it'll blow right into our area there, and we'd probably all expire from lung cancer or whatever, you know, we could get disease from.
Hydrologists with the U.S. Geological Survey have identified 4 subsurface pathways by which radioactive waste buried at Ward Valley, leaking down into the aquifer, would eventually make it to the Colorado River.
And 20 million people drink this Colorado water and use for irrigation. All your produce would be contaminated and all that. So it's very dangerous for everybody, mainly for us, you know, the Indian tribes. If it's ever contaminated, all our area, where do we go? This is our area. We can't go nowhere at all, nowhere but here.
The potential hazards to affect our people could not only eliminate our creative people, but would have the potential of affecting 23 million people of the Southwest, California, Arizona, and Mexico. Major water travels from the Colorado River to Los Angeles, San Diego, Phoenix, Tucson, and this water source is what feeds all the farms of the irrigation in the Imperial Valley, and this provides a major source of vegetables and fruits for not only the United States but the whole world. Now, one of the things that we were afraid of was that not only would this affect us economically, but it would affect our tradition, our culture, our heritage, and our basically our way of life. This area is a sacred area for us, and for us to allow this to happen, we consider that desecration of a sacred site.
In early 1997, the U.S. government, we found out, was going to have a tour with the nuclear industry of Ward Valley. Unfortunately, and as part of the bias that we saw, they didn't even bother inviting the tribes, whose sacred land it was, who were the closest communities to participate, to share their opinion. When it was discussed what should be the response to this tour that was going to happen by the government and nuclear industry, I helped propose with others that, in fact, we provide a little welcome.
You make it, you throw it, you can't use it while you want to dump it or not. Our future is holding like this Colorado River, and the kids are going to be contaminated. Our future is going to be gone. Why do you guys want to do this? Why do you guys want to make stuff and throw it away, give it wasted our land? Why don't you take it back to your own house?
Okay, if you'll just allow me to go back with my group, I'd appreciate that very much.
Go back to your group and take them to lunch.
We are standing here to protect the generations to come, which is our children, which you don't give a damn about, and we do. If I didn't firmly believe in my heart that this site was 100% safe, I wouldn't be here today promoting it.
Why didn't you allow us to film the meeting yesterday? You did not allow us to film your portion of the meeting. We had a video camera, and we wanted to present it to the other people who didn't make it there, and you said no.
Because there was no reason for you to film, in my opinion, yesterday.
Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am?
No, I don't.
You don't, but you can make decisions about my fate and my future, right?
You introduce yourself, I'll be...
But you can make the fate of my future, right? This is just a glimmer, a hint, the tip of the iceberg of what you can expect should you ever try to move this project forward. You think U.S. ecology is bad press now? Just wait. Just try to build it.
Could I be allowed to take the group of people that I brought with me who came a long way to go down to our facility and
not your facility.
Not your facility.
Why is it yours? Dad, bud.
The facility
that will never be built.
Not ever.
Ever. We guarantee it.
We're not doing anything but protecting ourselves, and that's our right.
Yeah.
And we've got that right, and this is why we're here. We're out here in peaceful protest. We're not out here to break the law. The Bureau of Land Management has asked us to allow them to continue on their way to the Ward Valley site. And so what I'd like to do is ask all the people if they can go ahead and allow this group to continue on their tour. We've got our message clear across to them. We've also got the media that has gotten our message to these people, and they're going to take it out to also in representation for ourselves. We've claimed a victory right now, I can tell you that. Let's hear it for yourself.
All the scientists and all the people that are so smart, why do they not see what might happen?
Scientists were saying there's no water out in the desert. Makes you think, where these scientists come from? Are they really scientists? You know, are they really telling the truth, or are they trying to bluff you? No way to trust scientists. When I look at the scientists, the panel on there, they were all one color, and that upset me a lot. I even brought the question up about that. Of course, I think if you had scientists of a different color, they'd probably go the same way. They'd go the same direction where the money's at. And I think that's the name of the game out here is money is the issue for the dump out in this area here. They wouldn't care for me. They wouldn't care for you. They wouldn't care for anybody. All they care is for the big bucks, big money.
When industry and government wants to find a place to dump some type of dangerous waste that nobody really wants, they look, where is the path of least resistance? Where can we site a facility that nobody who really knows about this, you know, where they might not find out about it, or they might not have the political power or the resources to fight it? And in fact, the least likely to resist were seen as rural, as religious, as lower income, as needing economic development, as a place where there might not be active environmental groups or a lot of environmental lawyers. It's always where lower income people and often people of color live. And that is what we call environmental racism. The government did offer the tribes large amounts of money and incentives to not oppose the siting of the Ward Valley nuclear waste dump. And the tribes said, yes, we need the money. We're poor, we're impoverished, we need economic development, but we are not willing to sell our soul. We're not willing to sell out our heritage, our culture, the health of our people. And they turned down all the attempts to be bought off.
We had to get together, the river tribes. There's 5 tribes along this river. So we had to form alliance to fight against this radioactive waste that's going to be coming in here.
I had to not only form an alliance, but also I had to form a coalition because there was non-Indians that were against the siting too also, and they didn't know how to help.
We encouraged successfully the press to finally pay attention to this issue. We went up repeatedly to Sacramento and had protests and press conferences and pressured the governor and talked to legislators. There were press conferences and events at the federal buildings in Los Angeles and in San Francisco and in Phoenix. There were press conferences with religious leaders and community leaders and Reverend Jesse Jackson and Bonnie Raitt and TV stars and just regular folks all coming together. There was just all types of protests.
We had to make a stance not only to the United States Congress, but to the Secretary of Interior. We went all the way to President Bill Clinton. We went into the Council on Environmental Quality of the White House. And not only that, but we went into court and we won 4 major battles in the Supreme Court.
The reason that the tribes fought so hard for so many years, first and foremost, was the fact that they believed that Ward Valley was profoundly sacred, that they believe that the Colorado River is profoundly sacred, that they believe that they were placed there by their Creator to protect that sacred land and protect that river. I believe that was the #1 driving force. At the same time, they researched, they did their homework. Before this dump was proposed, I'm sure very few of them were experts in nuclear waste disposal. I can assure you that there are now many, many experts among just the regular tribal members as well as tribal leaders along the Colorado River on nuclear waste.
The nuclear waste that was proposed to be here was going to be coming from the nuclear power plants such as cesium and strontium and nickel-59, under the guise that the public relations cell was that it was going to be for basically for medical waste. Nuclear waste and its repository has been traditionally shallow land burial, which is just basically digging a hole in the ground and dumping 55-gallon drums of nuclear waste and covering it up.
We know that these things leak, and there is now greater pressure for real changes in how waste is disposed. Instead of dumping it above an aquifer in a hole in the ground near a river that provides drinking water for so many people, let's keep waste like nuclear waste above ground, where it's generated, where it can be monitored and watched in case it leaks, and then secured.
We're not anti-nuclear. However, our basis was that we are opposed to the siting of a nuclear facility so close to the water resource of the Southwest.
When I was going to high school, I can remember when there was rain about every week. The roads are all, dirt roads are all messed up. That means there was a lot of water in the desert. Or where does the water go? We know that out here in the desert, all the water, when it rains, hits one direction. It's part of the tributaries that forms the Colorado River. So that's what concerns me about putting a dump out here. Putting a dump out here is in shallow unlined trenches. The elements that's in the dump should have reached the aquifer down here or reached the river, it would poison people, and that alarmed me a lot.
The nuclear waste industry is willing to spend $50 a square foot by digging a hole in the ground and exposing this nuclear waste to people, instead of spending $500 for properly handling it in MRS systems, monitor retrievable storage units.
Ultimately, I knew that the government didn't care about the facts. The government knows that all the nuclear waste dumps, like the one that would have been built at Ward Valley, they know that they all leak. That's a fact. They don't care. What this would probably come to would be a showdown in the desert when the government and industry attempted to move the dump project forward. And that's exactly what it came to, a showdown in the Mojave Desert at Ward Valley.
We have been fighting this for years. We've been expressing our words, our hearts, asking somebody to listen to us. We're at this point because nobody has listened. This is our homeland. Water and land is sacred to us. We're defending that right to defend our own homeland.
And for us to actually stop that, it did take a land takeover that occurred in February of 1998. We held this land out here to get the attention of President Clinton for 113 days. This is the longest occupation since Wounded Knee back in 1972 against the United States of American Indians.
For the last 11 years, we struggled. We committed resources that could have gone elsewhere to fight this dump. We have put out a lot of money, time, effort. And today we have 4 other tribes that believe in what we're trying to do here because it's going to affect all of us.
But this is our land. It's been. It's going to be. We're not going nowhere.
We are going to win victory. Our Creator said so. And she wanted your response. She said, we're going to win, right?
This area is a sacred area for us, and under the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, we held this land and conducted our ceremonies out here because that's our given right. And to us, this area right here, as a gift from our Creator, has allowed us to perpetuate our people, and this we want to continuate this. So we held this land in great honor, and with our spiritual strength, we stopped the federal government and the state of California from coming in here just so that they can dump their waste.
We shall not be moved like the tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved.
It is the most sacred area in all of the North American continent. As a matter of fact, just south of here is where we have the sacred mountains of Turtle Mountains. That's why they call it Turtle Island. This is the center of creation, and these people picked the wrong place to come and put a nuclear dump at the center of creation. This is a blasphemy. This is worse than putting a dump right there at the tomb of Christ.
We won that round, so I would say that we did a very good job, and even today we're still here. The thing that we did here, we said no violence. We're not going to have no violence to be part of it, to show that, like other people do, nationalities do, and we just didn't believe in violence. So that's the reason why we stayed this long, I believe, nonviolence.
It was worth everything because we laid our life on the line. We didn't care what happened to us. If it meant that, that's what they said, we'll go. And that's how we came here. And we did our spiritual awakening. It was like a dream. It was like a dream. We sat around the fire. We had a big round circle and fire going everywhere. There were people marching up and down this road that way. People were laying on the road. We were all fighting for what we believe in.
If you talk about a dream, my dream is for a clean desert, clear desert, a dump not to be here. So we get, when we die, our spirit will make that complete journey.
The beauty and significance of the story of Ward Valley is that this fight showed that communities that come together and are willing to do whatever it takes to win can actually win against these giant corporations, some of the biggest corporations in the world, backed by the biggest government in the world. It shows that people, just ordinary people, can do extraordinary things and stand up when you know what the facts are, when you know what the science is, when it's on your side, and you also have truth and justice on your side, and you're willing to make that stand, that you can win against all odds.